Good day, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic. Today, for your news update, we're going to cover how Texas faces catastrophic flooding with over 100 confirmed dead as rescue teams continue operations amid washout towns. Trump imposes steep tariffs up to 40% on imports from 14 countries starting August 1st, signaling a renewed America First agenda. Trump reversed Pentagon freeze to fast track Patriot missiles to Ukraine despite dwindling U.S. stockpiles and rising Russia attacks. Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump reportedly discussed a plan to forcibly relocate nearly 2 million Palestinians from Gaza, sparking global outrage. And the term, the label, the classification, and the way they have manipulated the term African America. We're going to break it down all for you here today. This is Blacklogic. So again, this is a real reality that this flood is affecting so many people. Already reports over 100 people have perished, with a third of them being children. And these towns that near Kerr County in Texas, they're willing for support. They need assistance from not only state officials, federal officials, but mostly those people in that region and the nation to donate to certain causes. So again, they can have some sort of a livelihood when it comes to shelter, food, and water. Now, if it's in you guys' heart to give, here's another organization that you guys may not be aware of. Let me pop this on your screen here. And this is the Samaritan's Purse that you guys can go and donate to the victims in support of not only cleaning up the town, but rebuilding houses and, of course, giving the assistance and help that the people in this area absolutely need. So again, they are expecting rain here in the next couple of days, but not as much rainfall. But regardless, they're still trying to repair where it has been totally damaged. The loss of life is great, but they're going to need our support. President Trump has already came out yesterday stating that he signed some assistance, some federal assistance to help, again, to mitigate the circumstances that a lot of these people are actually going out. This is a very heart-wrenching story because so many people have lost their life due to this flood. Now, when we look at all of the things that we're going to cover this morning, I really want to keep you guys abreast of certain situations because I believe it's very imperative that we look at this systematically. There's a lot of things occurring all at one time, and we cannot lose focus of what's going on in the world when it pertains to America. Because I know a lot of times we can look at this very, very differently, just depending on how we look at, just depending on how we view the news or things that are occurring. Some things seem, they seem fictitious. They seem, although they're not real because it's not happening to us, but these things are very, very real. President Trump just launched an aggressive economic move, slapping up to 40% tariffs on 14 countries starting August 1st. And a lot of people have been coming about these tariffs, stating that some of them assist the American people, some of them may hurt the American people, that a lot of the things that President Trump has done has really damaged the economy altogether, and that we should be against a lot of these hikes when it comes to tariffs. Now, when it comes to the 40% tariffs, I want to look at a list here very, very soon on the 14 countries. But they had nations on there like Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia, South Africa being hit the hardest. And a lot of people are just thinking, is this a warning shot to rein in global trade imbalances? Like, this is unfair what America is doing? Or is this a high stakes gamble before November? Okay, so as we look at some of these countries, and I'll blow this up for you guys on your screen here, some of the countries that they highlighted, it says that the new tariff rates to the leaders of Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Kazakhstan, South Africa, Laos, Myanmar, Tunisia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Serbia, Cambodia, and Thailand. And they have a list here of how he has decreased some of the tariffs that he proposed April 2nd. Not by much. Some of them are staying the same. As you can tell, South Korea, 25% is staying the same, but Tunisia has been decreased to 25%. South Africa is staying at 30%. Bosnia is at 30% that once was at 35%. Again, this is all part of America First agenda, that America has not been awarded a fair deal when it comes to tariffs of imports and export tax. So again, a lot of us are looking at this analytically, but nobody really knows how this is going to matriculate throughout the government, how this is going to benefit the deficit, how this is going to decrease the deficit on our side, how it's going to benefit the American people. So a lot of us, unfortunately, we just have to wait. That's just the nature of the beast. We just have to wait to see what's going to occur. Now, after a Pentagon halt on a certain weapon shipment to Ukraine, Trump is now pushing through a direct transfer of Patriot missile systems, including at least 10 interceptors. The former president, the current president is also pressuring Germany to send its systems. This signals a dramatic turn in U.S. military posture, just as Russia has intensified its missile campaign, because President Trump has stated, we continue to fork out defense mechanisms, resources, military equipment, and money to Ukraine, but the European nations are stating hands off. We'll give them a loan. Don't get me wrong. The European nations have given Ukraine multiple loans, more so than America. America has been giving Ukraine grants. And so President Trump is retracting a lot of the support, because I think this is a negotiating tactic where you retract some of your support to encourage others who live right beside Ukraine to support their neighboring country. So I wonder if this is because of the fractured relationship that Ukraine never entered NATO. And they never entered NATO because Russia stated if Ukraine enters NATO, they're going to go to war. But I guess that doesn't mean anything now, because they are at war. This is not shocking to any of us when it comes to the discussions of Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump. They have reportedly discussed a plan to forcibly take over Gaza. This is the second time that this have been brought up. They're talking about forcibly planning to relocate Palestinians that are in the region. And sources confirm that the plan could affect nearly 2 million people, raising legal, moral, and even ethical from a geopolitical alarm. Because when you look at this, basically you're saying you're going to render this place, I guess, some sort of impasse between America and Israel, because both of them are in cahoots with one another of relocating nearly 2 million people from the Gaza Strip, which is in the country of Palestine. And believe me, folks, Israel, there's no way Israel will be able to do this without America's support, without American resources, without the threat of America doing more damage, more harm within that area. So again, critics are calling it a ethnic cleansing in a disguise. Supporters call it strategic relocation. So again, if you're for this, then you're stating that this is a strategic relocation. And if you're looking at this sideways, you're probably stating that, is this ethnic cleansing? And ethnic cleansing to me is just a fancy way of saying genocide. I don't think it's an ethnic cleansing. That means they're going to unalive a lot of folks. But relocating is basically you're going to occupy this region and you're going to call it your own. That is what I'm getting from this. Now, Zoran Madawi. We have to talk about this gentleman here in totality because of how he has classified himself in America. He has classified himself in America as Asian and African. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm just going to read some of the highlights I have here. I think this is going to set the premise of this next segment. But it states that Madawi received a 2140 out of 2400 on the test. He took the SATs, which was on the lower end of the median scores for admitted students to Columbia University, but was likely above, doesn't mean that it is, the median score for Black students, independent journalist Christopher Rufo reported, okay? And as you see here, it says Madani listed that he was both Asian and Black African-American when applying to Columbia University. Now, he never attended Columbia University. We'll get on that a little bit later. But it stated that the Ugandan-born Madani got hammered by critics after the bombshell revelation that he listed that he was both Asian and Black African-American when applying to Columbia University, where his father is a professional. So legacy, using, some systematic legislation that Black Americans have fought for so we can have some sort of equality when it comes to education. Now, it goes on to state here, folks, the university had affirmative action policies when Madani applied in 2009, which critics said may have been the catalyst for the poll listing himself as Black in order to get preferential treatment. The 33-year-old Queens assemblyman told the New York Times, which reported on Madani's application, that while he doesn't consider himself African American, no, I don't consider myself African American. He considered himself an American who was born in Africa. And the application didn't have a category that fully explained his identity, Madani said. Now, and he goes on to say some other things that are not that important. But if you are an American that was born in Africa, then technically you are an African American, just like Charlize Theron and Elon Musk. All of these guys are African Americans. And I really do think it's important to point this out, because the term African American has been manipulated, it's been coerced, it's been sort of a straw man label term categorization of people. Because at one point in time, we're going to get into this, we're going to break this down, ladies and gentlemen, but let me point out a couple of things I have for you very, very quickly. When it comes to Zohar Madani, he is from Uganda, a country in Africa. Elon Musk, South Africa, Pretoria, South Africa. Charlize Theron, South Africa. Now, when you look at the race of these people and as they classify their own selves, Madani is East Indian. Okay, he's from an Indian family to academic, I said, Mahmoud Madani, and filmmaker. His family immigrated. Listen to this. His family immigrated to South Africa when he was 5 years old and to the United States when he was 7, selling in New York City. So he wasn't even born in Africa. He was actually born in India, but he immigrated to South Africa when he was 5 years of age. Okay. But, these other two are definitely, they were born and raised in South Africa. But again, this is to set the premise for this next segment. I really want to break down this term African American because I believe it's important. And it's not to be mixed up with certain symbolisms and flags like the maroon flag that represent the Maroon Foundation of Black Americans, the Black Heritage flag that represents Black Americans. And you know what? Let's break this down very quickly. Let's look at this, family. Let's look at this very, very quickly here. I want to give you guys this quick breakdown. Hopefully you guys can see this on your screen. But it states for the Black Heritage flag that the black of the color of black within the flag represents the Black American community, signifying pride, pigmentation, race, and collective identity. Red symbolizes the bloodshed by Black Americans in their fight for freedom, justice, and human dignity throughout history. The gold signifies intellect, prosperity, and peace. The golden wreaths of fig leaves. The fig is native to Africa to show our ancestry of 1,000 years past, that in some regards, all people derive from Africa. But again, we understand the context, what I'm getting. And this is one of the oldest life-sustaining fruits, representing peace, prosperity, and everlasting life. The blunted Moorish boarding sword. This symbolizes the strength and authority of a Black culture that made significant contributions to the world in various fields, especially here in America, like mathematics, art, medicine, and physical science. It also signifies resilience and the ability to cultivate the earth. That is what this flag means. So again, none of this is meant to be mixed up with the term African American. So again, we have to define the term African American as it pertains to the United States Census records or the United States Bureau when it pertains to the topic of race. It states here, a white person, okay, and it's quite liberal. Let me highlight this for you guys very quickly, because I want to make sure I break that down. Okay, there's a system error. But it says white, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa. Okay, Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa. And that's mostly because a lot of those North African countries, Algeria, Libya, not Egypt to a certain degree, but a lot of those Arab countries, when you go to these countries, like what's the country that a lot of people try to claim within certain movements? I'm trying to remember that claim. Morocco. That's the country I'm referring to, Morocco. When you go to certain parts of Morocco, ladies and gentlemen, people are white. People are either white or light olive skin. They're probably, or you know, if you look at their genealogy, you look at their phenotype, if you trace back their records, their DNA, most of them have white ancestry and or Middle Eastern ancestry. But when it pertains to America, a white person, when you come to America, you're considered white if you're from the Middle East. If you're from Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, any of these countries, Yemen, Jordan, you're considered white when you come to America. Now, the only mix-up I have with this, if you're from a North African country, if you're from one of the countries that derived outside of the United Arab Emirates, and you have dark skin like mine, are you still considered white in America as it pertains to the U.S. Census Bureau and the definition therein? This is what they're stating here, folks. This is what they're stating. And it states here from the U.S. Census Bureau, Black or African American is a person having origins in any of the Black racial groups of Africa. Very, very interesting. And the reason why I raise alarm to this is because Zohar Madani stated that, no, I don't consider myself African American, but I consider myself an American who was born in Africa. Wait a minute. Didn't you go to Uganda when you was 5 years of age? Now, and again, this could be very argumentative because I think some of the sources that they're getting here is from Wikipedia. But let's just do a quick Google search while we're here live. Where was... They keep stating that he was born in Uganda. Okay, they keep stating that the birthplace that he was actually born in is in Uganda. But some reports had that he came to Uganda when he was 5 years of age. They said both of his parents are of Indian descent. So it's kind of one of those things that President Trump brought to light when he was talking about where President Obama was born. But everybody knows that President Obama was actually born in Hawaii, but he was trying to claim that he was actually born in Kenya. He's not an American citizen. Thus, he should not be the president of the United States. This is, this is birthright gate, or this is the originality of where people were born, and the confusion that this surrounds this all together when we look at it, family. Okay, but let's get into it. African Americans. The three people that you see on your screen here are African American for what it takes. For all intents and purposes, the people you see on your screen are African American. And the term African American emerged in the late 20th century as a dignified political and cultural identifier for who? Black Americans, descended from enslaved Africans that were in this country. It linked ancestry, identity, and the legacy of chattel slavery in the United States. Specifically referred to the unique racial group whose ancestors were brought involuntarily and those who were already here on this landmass through the Middle Passage and enslaved on U.S. soil. It acknowledged both African descent and our American birthright, thus distinguishing from other Black diaspora populations like people who are from the Caribbean, Jamaica, Trinidad, African countries like Uganda and South Africa. Over time, because African American was codified into government categories such as the U.S. Census, as which we just saw here, it became available to anyone who identify as Black and either descends from or was born in Africa. This is why this term has been so mixed and mastered when it comes to the U.S. Census record. And I think it's very important to note here. Now, a recent high-profile example that we're covering is Zohar Madani, Elon Musk, and Charlize Theron. But as it pertains to Zohar Madani, a Indian with Indian heritage was born supposedly, allegedly in Uganda. He identified himself as both Asian and Black African American when applying to Columbia University. He later stated, as we covered, that nothing else suited my situation since he was born in Africa, thus him checking off African American. Now, here's where it shifts, and I need for you guys to stay with me because Africa is not a race. Africa is not a race, it's a place, it's a continent. And the census record and institutions now allow anyone who is from Africa, whether native or have naturalized in that continent or parentage, to use the category of African American. See, that dilution means people with no ancestral descent from enslaved Black Americans can occupy this historical and political and cultural identity once reserved for descendants of chattel slavery. Thus, you have, they're all African because of where they derive from. Because of where they derive from. Foundational Black Americans who are descendants of U.S. enslaved Africans increasingly see this as a hijacking or bastardization of the term. Because a lot of people have always asked, what in the hell is a foundational Black American? Well, it refers to specifically to Black people whose ancestors were enslaved in the United States of America, tracing lineage back to freed slaves counted in early U.S. Census record, most likely 1870s, 1900s, etc., most notably 1790. Now, the concept gained traction in online and activist spaces drawn on work by figures no other like Tariq Nasheed, Dr. Claude Anderson. They have discussed the term in relation to Anderson's ideas, emphasizing the historical lineage of Black Americans born from slavery in the United States. FBA is lineage-based, not merely phenotype or birthplace-based. It offers specificity, people who can document their descent from those enslaved in U.S. slavery and that are rooted in the country's foundational Black experience. Legal segregation, Jim Crow, civil rights struggle, and reparations claim. All of those pertains to the categorization of what a foundational Black American is. Now, critics argue that FBA ideology can be exclusionary, drawing a line between us and newer African Caribbean immigrants, and may echo othering or national politics. And it absolutely does that, because no one of African or Caribbean lineage can relate to this flag that they see on their screen. No one can relate to this flag. No one can relate to this flag. No one can relate to this flag. the good old American flag, which foundational Black Americans stand 10 toes down on, that this is our flag as well as this flag. So in totality, I mean, you see the flags now popping up, the American flag, because we are Americans. The Juneteenth flag to represent the freedom of 2 years after slavery that Texas released their enslaved Black Americans too. And the Black Heritage flag that symbolizes Black Americans in this country, and the warrior class of foundational Black Americans. So again, all of these flags represent who and what we are, not the RBG flag, not the red, black, and green flag. That's some sort of Pan-African flag that we had to delineate from very, very obvious reasons. Now let's get on these South Africans and these Ugandans. These Africans over here. And I'm only talking about these Africans you see on your screen. Okay, I'm just being somewhat hyperbolic about it. Why foundational Black Americans offers a clear identity. It's important that we make a clear distinction between the two. Because foundational Black Americans' identity, only those whose ancestors were enslaved in the United States of America, not the Caribbean, not Africa, not Europe, or any place else. And the political clarity of it, it centers descendants of slavery who experienced unique historical and structural oppression. And as it pertains to the resistance to appropriation, it cannot be adopted without documented lineage, which some people try to fake or whitewash this. So again, the term African American was born from resistance, pride, and reclaiming an identity. It stood as evidence of the survival and resilience of people whose ancestors were ripped from their homelands and forced into bondage. But in today's America, it has been amalgamated, it has been manipulated, it has been coerced, it has been codified, it has been whitewashed. Because to a certain degree, when you look at this labeling and this categorization of the term African American, as you guys can tell, anybody can be African American. White people can be African American. Asian people can be African American, because again, Zohar Madawi is an Indian American or African American or a Asian African American, however he classify himself. And again, it gets convoluted. The waters get murky. And that's what you see here, ladies and gentlemen, because he's of Indian descent, born in Uganda, and he can select African American all he wants on forms because Africa is his alleged birthplace, not lineage. Meanwhile, tens of millions of foundational Black Americans, descendants of U.S. enslavement, are left sharing a term that no longer honors their true legacy. It no longer honors or represents our true legacy. Because now anybody can be African American. And we've been saying this for quite some time. Charlize Theron, Elon Musk, they've been here for years. They've been here for decades. And they stated that they're African American because they're American citizens and they're from Africa, thus they are African American. That's why the term foundational Black American matters. And so many people have been warding against this. They've been so against the term. Whatever happened to the term African American connecting us to our roots in Africa? It's because anybody, I mean anybody, can be African American. When I was in Kenya, my family and I, we went to Kenya last year. And I went into an establishment inside of a mall, and there was a Kenyan gentleman. And then there was a Kenyan gentleman who looked Indian. And he told me that he was Indian Kenyan. I was like, wow. And so, again, that gets convoluted because when you look at countries, right? Countries in some regards had an identity. It had an identity of the way you look, the way you were shaped, how tall, how short you were, your culture, the food you ate, the clothes you wear. But this is no longer the case. This is no longer the case because guess what? There's also East Indians in Trinidad. They have Madras Indians in Trinidad that mix and match with those people. So again, the place where you're from has nothing to do with your race. And this is why the term foundational Black America, because he would never claim to be Black unless his great-great-grandfather was 2% Black. And you hear some people that are non-Black or non-Black looking to state that, oh, I'm Black too. My great-grandmother, great-grandfather was 20% Black. I don't know where they come up with these percentages, but somehow they do the math. But they said that they were Black. And so, again, that could be very debatable. But in a lot of regards, he never stated that he was Black. He stated that I'm American that was born in Africa. Thus, that's the term that suited me. I am African American. And he's correct. He's correct, but with one exception. According to the U.S. Census, Lord have mercy on your soul, the etymology of words. When you use this term Black or African American, a person having origins in any of the what? Black racial groups of Africa. This is why people stating that he was trying to double dip when it comes to affirmative action. He like, I can cover the Asian affirmative action. I can cover the Black or African American affirmative action. So again, according to the U.S. Census, again, I want to beat the drum on this, of any of the Black racial groups of Africa, unless they're just all African. When I look at it, see, foundational Black American really matters because it recenters our history roots. It really centers our history roots in the struggle for reparations and civil rights that is uniquely foundational Black Americans and clears up confusion. If you can trace your family to, let's say, the 1870 or 1900 U.S. Census Register, most likely, okay, most likely. I tend not to go past 1870, but most likely you are foundational Black American more times than not. Your ancestors built this nation under unimaginable oppression. So it matters. It matters. Yes, it matters. Our identity matters. Our history matters. Our rights matter. If we will not own our name, how can we claim our story? How can we claim our story? African American began as a race-based term. That's what it began as, family. African American began as a race-based term grounded in U.S. slavery. But today it's inclusive of anyone with African origin or nationality. I just want you guys to think about all the different people who are in Africa. There's not just Black Africans, there's white Africans, there's Asian Africans. Wait a minute. Has anyone of Asian or Chinese, not Asian, but Chinese descent ever been born in Africa? They have. So again, a Chinese person can come to America and they can say, I'm African American. And they'll be right. They were born in the continent of Africa. And if they naturalize as a citizen of America, thus they are African American. Now, I understand that the expansion and ambiguity of African American has diluted its specificity, and historical integrity when it comes to this term and label. That means there are a lot of people who are African American and not Black. So Tariq Nasheed coining the term foundational Black American is very important because it restores lineage clarity. It shows our heritage. It shows our lineage. It refers only to descendants of enslaved Black people in the United States of America. Documented very early census records. So it cut out all the riffraff of the term African American because, again, a dark-skinned African can come over here and state that they are American. And here's another thing that people don't really look at. A lot of people ancestry, even white folks, are from the continent of Africa. Let's say Jamaicans, let's say Trinidadians, let's say people from the Caribbean. Their ancestry derives from the continent of Africa. They can come here and get naturalized and say, you know what, I don't want to use the term Jamaican. That's just another country. I'm going to use where my people are from, Africa. I'm African American. So again, this term has been so darn diluted. And using the term FBA is really empowering. And I believe that we should be using it all the time, everywhere we go. Because using FBA empowers descendants of slavery to reclaim an identity rooted in history and rooted in struggle, a term others cannot appropriate. So when it comes to African Americans, you might just want to see who's African and who's foundational and who's Black American.